All right, welcome. Welcome back.
Mate, thanks for having us.
Straight. I feel like I'm back.
Yeah. You're back in the seat.
We're going to touch on, we're going to elaborate on the last one. We had a good little conversation around serving and the freedom and having the right heart and all that sort of stuff. And then we had a chat afterwards and thought, hey, let's come back with a round two and really touch on what it looks like to have the revelation of what it is to be serving. And we talk about the idea of healthy serving, but really it's a revelation that once you have, it's just serving based on knowing Christ and what He told us. Before we rip in, how was your holidays?
Very good.
Mum was tremendous.
Very good.
I laid by the pool.
Yep.
I ate schnitzels.
He didn't have a holiday.
No, I was pouring it out.
Pouring it out, mate. Hashtag pouring it out.
As Brody always says to me, pouring it out, Dan, pouring it out. I don't know what I'm pouring out, but
Is that he going back in?
Pouring it out. What about you, Scotty?
he said maybe it's unhealthy.
It's empty now. Oh, yeah, mate. Awesome. Very good. Lots of just a staycation, as we do in these current COVID times. Not much travel, but lots of time with the family, extended family, friends, swimming, sun. What more can you ask for?
What'd you do? You didn't go to Sydney. You couldn't go.
No.
You hung around.
So we got stuck here, first time in our lives, not being in Sydney over Christmas.
Was it good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good and really different, weird, strange.
Mm.
So we have a lot of traditions in Sydney that we're used to. So
Yeah.
Hey, knowing that's the 7th for us, but it's the 6th in America. Was I the only one out of you three up at 4 a.m. watching Fox News, or?
Yes.
yeah, only because I was praying.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Jeez, I wish we were doing a podcast on that. Oh my gosh, wild times. Scotty, you had a few thoughts on around healthy serving, and I'd love it just to throw it to you first up and hear your thoughts on really, I suppose, giving some positive encouragement around people on their walk and hopefully some answers we maybe didn't touch on last time.
Yeah. I think to bring balance to the last episode, because we spoke about obligation versus freedom. So you can hear that word freedom and take it the wrong way. And you may listen to that episode and think we're just saying, hey, you just sit on the couch and do nothing. That's not what we're saying. So I think to bring balance to that, I love this quote. Do you guys know Dietrich Bonhoeffer?
Yeah. Heard of
German
him.
theologian. No. He was around the time of Hitler. Amazing guy. I encourage you to check him out. But he's got this quote which I think sums up what serving, like what healthy service in God's economy looks like. And the quote is, Bonhoeffer saw freedom as freedom for, not freedom from. And I think, we talk about freedom. We have to be very careful we don't bring our Western individualistic, I'm out to get mine, YOLO, you only live once, I'm here to make myself happy mindset to something which is a kingdom principle, which is what Jesus has done in us gives us the freedom to then pour out to others and pass that on, essentially. So to me, serving is a lifestyle. I'm sure we'll go into Romans. Someone will rip that scripture out where Paul talks about our worship to Christ is the way that we live our life. Yeah. But freedom, the freedom from obligation is not, I'm just going to do whatever I want, whenever I feel like it, or whatever I want to do when I want to do it. It's not about that. It is obligation. Freedom from obligation does not mean disobedience. So I think that's a real key thing that we could talk about is obedience to Christ. And, we spoke on that last episode about our love for Christ is first, and out of that flows actions. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the word, I'll throw it down with the idea behind obedience. Last time we used the word obedience was in the context of almost like a forced serving to man or to please someone else. In this case, in this episode, maybe we're touching on obedience now to God out of a revelation.
Yeah, I think, well, if you look at obedience is directly, I think, connected to action. So the other word that we probably haven't touched on, have we done a series on submission? No. Is that maybe coming up?
It's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up. Oh,
that's episode 100.
It's going to get heavy. I think, obedience to God should come out of a foundation of a revelation of who Christ is in my life. Because if I just obey when it comes to my service in the context of community and church and ministry, because I feel obligated, or I'm just obeying because, man, that's what I'm meant to do. I think that's where it gets very unhealthy. But if my foundation is founded in that reality of, man, Christ did give his life and gave everything for me.
Yeah.
So out of that revelation, I want to operate with freedom to give my life, but not from a erroneous, look out, boys. Man, I've just pulled that out of the vault. Erroneous, foundation.
Just Google that for me.
Yeah.
Just could you just check that's a correct, in the light of this conversation.
Grammar. Your grammar is correct.
But yeah, I mean, you think about it. If that foundation is faulty, man, it gets very, very exhausting and tiring. But I want to obey God out of that deep revelation, to make it biblically based, Romans 12, in view of God's mercy. In view of God's mercy, let us offer our lives as a living sacrifice, our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. So the premise that Paul stipulates there is the view or the perspective or the attitude, the mindset is in taking his mercy that he's extended to me as the platform. That makes sense? So out of that revelation that God has poured out his mercy and his grace upon my life, man, I'm going to offer up my body as a living sacrifice. I'm going to serve. I'm going to give my life. And that is a freedom in that. There's a great freedom. Like you say, freedom's not sitting around on the lounge and, flicking through Netflix and saying, well, I'm just free, baby.
That's okay too, though. Netflix is all right.
Yeah. Well, is it?
Well, actually, not Netflix.
Is
I've
that
actually unsubscribed.
Yeah,
Whoa. Okay. NBA's all right.
Is that another topic?
Another topic.
So that's I think the foundation of obedience is critical. Getting that right.
I had a question. So 22 years of ministry in different contexts. If you were to pick out a few different things in light of that scripture, where you've seen people serve in light of that scripture, is there anything that you could is there anything that pops up all the time that you see in people, an ethic, like something in their heart that allows them to operate or stay in that zone where it's not obligation and they stay in the freedom and view of God's mercy, that they're living that out?
Like in a practical sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually do think I might have touched on this last time.
Okay.
But one of the things I've observed and even in my own life that I've learned from others is, it's because of his mercy, and I'm breathing. I can open my eyes. It's his grace. But
Get to wear that shirt.
But I get to
fresh. It's fresh,
mate. Come on.
I saw him before. I said, "Be careful! Someone will milk you." Walking like that.
Somebody, I was about to quote a line from a movie that I will not quote. If you know the movie, you'll know what I'm about to say. Wow.
Sorry, mate, you're right.
No, it's good. You got to have some fun, don't you? At my expense, but whatever. I think understanding that I am serving for an audience of one. Yeah. I touched on this last time. I really think this is just a simplistic thing, but it's kept me in good stead because I haven't done it for the approval of a pastor, a leader, somebody who is, I'm under their authority, whatever you want to call it. I used to do that, and it is tiring. It does get exhausting because I'm like, oh man, did Scott see me? Does he know that I'm doing X, Y, Z? Does he know I've done this, that, and the other? But when I realize at a deep level that I'm basically doing it for God first, that the audience I have is him, and that's all that really matters. That has really kept me in a good place these years later. And I do see it in other people that aren't trying to strive for recognition, climb a ladder, get up to them, get on a platform or whatever, and because that's just exhausting. It's tiring.
You can pick that spirit out straight away, can't you? When they're not trying to get points or they're not doing something.
Yep.
To show anyone else, I don't know. You just pick it straight away.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I think doing I like to say from love, serving from love, not for. Two very different things, very close but really different. If you serve for love or give for love, you're in trouble. It's gonna hammer you. I don't think it takes too long you get exhausted and tired because you're trying to do something for. That's actually religion. That's what religion is. Okay, I'm going to give my tithes. I'll go there.
Yeah.
I'm going to give my money. I'm going to give my time. I'm going to give my gift because I want to hopefully get into God's good books for the accolade of somebody. That's an exhausting religious mentality. But if I serve and give my life from, that's really different. In other words, I know how deeply loved I am by God. And from that platform, because I have a revelation of that deep love, man, I'm in. I'm giving. I'm serving. Nobody has to tell me. I'm there. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think even from love, it's Paul says in Galatians in 5:13, I had it before, 5:13 I think it is, that you are called to freedom, but not to use that freedom to gain the flesh or indulge the flesh, but instead, out of love, he says, humbly serve. And so they like talk about what we're talking now. Those two words, love and serve, kind of go together.
Yep.
And if you do it out of love, your love for Christ, but your love for one another as well is super important in any context. I was thinking about that earlier, just when I ducked out before to get some really healthy food you guys saw me eating before the podcast.
Plant-based, clean eating.
My wife won't be watching, so that's all right. But I was thinking about the idea of serving and serving, obviously, God, but there is a part of us that you are called to serve others, serve your neighbour.
Very true.
And so that context then is, even if you find yourself in a church situation where you don't want to serve leadership, you're actually wrong because it's never about the leadership. So even if you have a problem with it, it's actually not about you serving them. You're there to serve one another, shoulder to shoulder, and you're there for the audience of God. That's my thought in my scripture, so all the haters can just back it up.
Biblically sound exegesis, sir.
Or was it
I've been reading all break. I
love talking about this concept of free will because the West doesn't get this because I don't think free will is free at all. If I'm free, like, we talk about freedom in the sense of kingdom freedom. There is an obligation there almost that because of what Christ has done for me, I do something for someone else. But free will, if I'm just let to do whatever I want, eventually my human desires are going to trap me somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
True. Because I agree. There is, we were talking about just before we kicked this thing off, there is a demand from Jesus.
Absolutely.
He says, you want to follow me, take up your cross and follow me. You want to be the greatest, become the servant of all. So there is that, like, I think there can be a healthy obligation, actually. Like, I feel obligated, not in a bad, negative sense of that word, man. Like, because it's, the reality is I'm deeply in love with Jesus, and he paid a high price for me. So out of that revelation, I want to give. And so I agree. I think there's definitely that element, a tension, if you like, because we often say in our little community, we're a hassle-free environment. We say it often, we're hassle-free. We're not going to hassle you. We're not going to tell you to come here and, get on board this train and this is the vision and this is the goal, this is where we're going, get on board, or if you're not on board, boot off. Not quite as clear cut as that, but that saying hassle-free is a fine line between that and what Jesus actually does demand. The closer we get with him, the more we walk with him, because he says a whole lot of things that demands me to die to my flesh and die to myself.
Okay, that's good. I think those of you who watched the first podcast, the last podcast on this topic, I guess a lot of the onus last time, or the focus was on the leader's responsibility and the platform and sort of managing that, whereas this time we're touching a bit more on your own responsibility. In you're actually called to be a servant, like in that way.
Yep.
So that's exactly what Jesus did. What do you reckon, Scotty?
Yeah, I had a thought and I just lost it.
Oh, that's right.
I've done a Brody Bicard.
That's okay. I'll give you something I prepared earlier.
This one's pre-cooked.
God's been giving me some dreams. I've even been writing them down. This isn't really on topic, but I thought I wanted to share it with you guys. So while you're thinking of your thought, have a listen to this dream. Where's the first one? I've had 3, so I want to go to the first one. It's in line with all our topics we talk about. This was mid-December. I had a dream about a person who had left the church, and in addition, they had denounced their faith. This person I dreamt of is a real person, and you guys probably know who I'm talking about maybe, and they have walked away from the church. But in my dream, they came back, and they actually went back to the very church they had walked away from. But God was showing me that the church looked different this time. God was speaking to me not about the prodigal son, but instead the position and the focus of the church. God had highlighted that the prodigal son actually needs something to come back to, and that the position and the health of the church is the most crucial right now. The church needs to have a unified vision to be the bride. He showed me the confusion of outsiders looking in. The themes, the flavors, and branding are capping the harvest of souls. Themes, flavors, and branding, unfortunately, is counterproductive in the way of uniting a broader church, and instead it creates comparison and competition. Stay with me. The season of individual churches having specific mandate personal to their senior leadership is looking to be over, and God is calling his bride to be one. Branding hasn't worked in creating disciples. It has caused a birth of influencers and not spiritual leaders. It doesn't help save lost souls. It confuses them on where to go. Different visions and styles are creating too many our way and their way conversations. It's beginning to be harder and harder to pick a church for friends because they are all too different and they end up compromising in one area in order to focus on another. The positive influence of the church and the power behind it will be found when the church is one across the globe.
Bada bing, bada boom.
That was my dream. Got your thought back?
Are we just leaving it there? Just let it hang out?
Tell me what you think.
What I think about that dream.
I woke up and wrote it down.
Yeah, well. So this is where my brain goes to is first of all we need to determine when we're talking about the church, what is a church? So to me, my definition of church is hearts and souls knitted together around the revelation that Jesus is the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
So however you want to meet, how big, small, what day, how often is really up to you guys as you do what you do as a community. In terms of unity, I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty charged word because it's always unity from my particular denomination. So when someone is often talking about unity, it's you guys out there need to change to what we do. And there's a real arrogance attached to it because we got the Spirit of God on us, and there's a movement happening here. So I would say the unity just needs to come back to
who Jesus is.
100%.
Yeah.
It's a revelation of who the Messiah is. That is what Jesus said to Peter. Based on this revelation of who I am, I will build my church.
Yeah.
And to me, that Jesus is doing the building. Where, and this comes back to what we're talking about freedom is the freedom to sort of coalesce together as hearts and minds focused on Jesus and shut it down after 2 years or whatever it may be. This podcast, our hearts have been turned to this podcast, and it'll go as long as we can flog it as long as we want, or we can put enough life around the spirit of this podcast and see where God leads it. Yeah. I see the same thing with church. So to me, the church is people come together, and it may be for a short season, maybe for long, maybe for 30 years, 40 years, whatever. That was sort of my thoughts that come to it. And then the brand thing, I guess we could do a whole podcast on
Another
that.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the idea behind that, it wasn't a dig at anyone's particular brand, but I felt like what God was saying in that is that because people they've made the particular church they're leading or go to, it's individualized to the leader.
Yeah. Which I think is
that
okay.
creates.
I actually think that's okay, as long as you don't then say, hey, we've got the right thing over here. Because if I was leading a church right now, I've got a youngish family, so I'm going to have a natural bent towards a family church, would I not? Because that's just the season of life I'm in. And then I could say we're a family church or we're this or that. It's okay. I don't see any problem with that, as long as you don't say that we've got the right definition of church. I think an expression springs up around people around Christ and whatever. If it's singles come together, that's fine.
The church
too.
is diverse.
Yeah.
Very diverse. And should be.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Cool.
There you go.
If we're going to come back to the freedom side of things. So, what about how does the freedom from obligation and our bodies being a living sacrifice to Christ? How do we see seasons of life fitting in with that?
Seasons
of life fitting in
as
with
in
that,
like
where
when you're single, you're time rich.
100%.
You can pour it out.
Yeah.
Get married and have kids, and life gets a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
I think I don't necessarily have a scripture base for this, but I absolutely believe that the way you serve and maybe the capacity of your ability to serve and give out in the church meetings and services that we do, that does change and should change, and it should adapt, because it's unrealistic to think that a 20-year-old who is single, who has a truckload amount of time, to think that, say, he's given X amount of time, and then there's somebody who has, even like yourself, 4 kids, working, and just Kirsten's got her hands full, and man, life's in full flight, to say, man, you have the same amount of time. No, you don't actually. And I think there should be freedom in that as well, to not necessarily, what's the word? I just think God is bigger than, saying, right, you need to do it. Does that, I don't know.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It makes
He's
sense.
bigger
Yeah.
than that. He's bigger than, I think he's okay with, there's seasons where, man, things shift and change, and those plates, tectonic, whatever, they're moving, and it's okay when sometimes you need to rest, sometimes you need to, pour more attention on your marriage or your children, and because that is part of our kingdom call or whatever. So I think seasons do come into play, and I think they should in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you've experienced that yourself, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I 4 kids, so nearly 15, 12, and then twin girls that are 3. So before the twins were around, we were just in a season of life where we had way more time, and we were pouring out, had the chance to pour out way more than what we do now. But coming into maturity as a Christian, I'm okay with that. But I guess I can see people being in environments where they're feeling guilty because they're not doing enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I was when I was serving when we were young. Both Claire and I, my wife, had talked about this. We did definitely, in our younger days, were yes to everything, at the expense of our own health, which I think is not good.
Yeah.
It's not actually good, because, I was, to my own mind anyway, I was more interested in pleasing man, and that wasn't good for me in the long haul anyway. So, I had to change and internally and work out why I was doing what I was doing, and actually it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
It's actually all right to say no.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think you should live in these places where, say, if I'm resting from, service and ministry, and
Just
it's like a
resting.
year or 2 later, and
Just
you're like,
resting.
I'm
I'm
still
just a monk now.
resting. I'm in Byron Bay.
People come to me. I don't go to them.
Yes. I think that gets unhealthy, obviously.
Yeah.
But there are definitely seasons and times, that demand that, I think, create the longevity anyway.
Almost everyone would go through that, wouldn't they? Almost everyone who comes into the church,
Yeah.
you get fired up.
Yeah.
You just
Yes.
get fired up and you want to pour it out. And you just do it flat out. And then everyone will basically go through it at some point. Because I'm not speaking for everyone, but I'm guessing most people would also go through the same, not just pouring it out, but you do it for yourself at first. You go through that journey of thinking, the more I do, the more I get. You go through that. Everyone kind of does that. If you don't do it earlier, you'll just end up doing it later. So it's just almost like it's just part of it. You learn it because it's just the culture we live in. It is the culture of the church the Western church. It's kind of the more you're doing, there's more happening. You organically and unofficially, cliques will happen or circles will happen, and you get in there organically by doing stuff. But if you're not around, sometimes you don't get in there. That's another podcast. I wasn't able to dig. You were laughing, thought I was going to light someone up. I wasn't. I was just saying, if you're around, it's easier to find yourself in certain circles. But if you're not, it is harder to be in those circles.
100%.
Your thought on that, Dan?
Oh,
You guys keep thinking I'm going to light it up. I'm not.
No.
I'm just saying.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's the idea of serving and giving is obviously it's God's mandate
Yeah.
for Christians. Leading and serving is the same spirit. They're the same spirit. What I mean by that is, this is not my own revelation. It came from the Reverend Dr. Bishop himself, Brian Houston.
Okay.
When we were younger in church, he used to talk about, like serving and leading, how they're the same spirit. Like, because I definitely thought when I was younger, I was doing those things because I wanted to get into the right spot at the right time, so then I can lead.
Yeah.
So my mentality, I was like, when I get to lead, well, I get to tell everyone what to do. That's what I'm after. Now, I'm not articulating that because only a fool would do that, but it's in my heart. And so I realized after a few years that the serving has got to be fundamental to all that I do.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by the same spirit. You don't serve, and then lead. They're exactly the same thing. What happens is the way I serve may change. The vehicle can change over time. But my spirit and heart should never change when it comes to serving others. And so, I think it's always a worry when we can get into those places where we're working angles.
There's a lot of wisdom in that too, is because you the benefit, this is what people probably don't realise, the benefit of having the same spirit when you lead as serving is you actually take the pressure off yourself.
Yeah.
You kind of, the vision or the agenda or the motive isn't about you.
Yeah.
If you always make it about God, which it should be, always takes the pressure off. We used to joke about little things, and you would get it too as preaching. You always feel nervous before you go on because you're like, I don't want, because you're thinking about it. But the minute you see it, you do.
No, I'm good, mate. I'm like
I'll see you out the back.
I'm like a machine.
Try reaching.
What are you talking about, mate? I'm a machine, mate. I'm like, I've got it all under control, people.
20 services on a Sunday.
No,
Yeah, that's
100%. Always get nervous.
But the minute you and that's within context, there's you should get nervous. That you should feel the weight of what you're doing. But what I mean is when you remind yourself that it's not about you, you kind of, certain nerves will leave, and there's a content and a peace in knowing, I'm just going to do this because this is actually about God. It happens all the time with worship and leading worship, and people walk up there and there's this pressure to wow people. And I've been watching a lot of Jeremy Riddle stuff, and he says a lot of great things about, someone will say, that worship leader's so anointing or so anointed. I understand the context of that, but reality is like it's not really about them. So if they don't do a good job or a bad job, it shouldn't really affect your worship experience. That at the deepest level of it, you should be able to lead yourself into worship in that context. So he always talks about a great place he gets questions about worship leaders saying, how do I go up there and not have pressure? And he's like, well, it's not about you. And that's a great key to.
This is true.
That's that same spirit of.
I took a lot of pressure off quite a few years ago preaching, because I used to finish preaching, and in my younger days, not so much these days, but because I had a lot more insecurity and stuff I was working through. But man, I used to get off a platform and go, man, that was the worst thing ever. I never want to do this again. That was horrible. It was all over the place. It was terrible. Sometimes I get off the platform and just go, man, I smacked that out of the park. Hammered that home. That was cracking.
You only get one like afterwards.
Just waiting for the followers.
I'm like,
follow me.
What's going on? But then I realized actually all my messages are average. This is not a false humility statement. You know false humility. This is just genuinely what I think and what I believe. They're all average, but it's the grace of God. And actually, I'm there to serve. Whoever's there in that setting of, man, hopefully I'm going to serve their family somehow, or their life, their marriage, their kids, whatever, their business. That's the premise, is I'm there to serve. So it's not about me. Who cares?
Yeah. And it's great to be able to even bring it down to the one. It's not really like a biblical foundation in this thought, but I always think if you're preaching or if you're worshiping, if one person gets something out of this, that's amazing. So it doesn't matter if you can't gauge on everyone. Everyone's got their hands up. That's irrelevant because sometimes that's just culture. People put their hands up, right? or everyone's singing really loudly. It might be the culture where everyone sings really loudly or they like the song, kind of irrelevant. But if one person has a real encounter with God or something happens or something shifts in that moment or they start to reconnect with Jesus again for the first time in a long time, I reckon that's amazing. And if you can, it's a weird way to think about it. If you go out there going, hopefully one person gets something, even for just me. Sometimes the best I've felt worshipping, like in front of people, is when I've just worshipped and actually forgot that they're there. And some people say, no, you have a responsibility. I get all that. But at the same time, if you're truly in worship yourself, organically they should feel that and sort of come off the back of that as well. Any thoughts? What about your worship leading days?
Yeah, mate. Killed it, as you can see. Seasoned performer.
I actually thought that was serious. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that.
No, let's touch on this.
Yes.
I'm going to call you both out.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Our last conversation, I learned some disturbing stuff about you guys. The kind of music you're into.
Absolutely.
What?
Everybody's free.
Oh, just the...
Yeah, that's
a banger. It's absolute classic.
That's Young and Free Hillsong stuff. Is that what we're talking about?
Should clarify, actually, no, for the people listening, it wasn't that bad. It's just a bit fast tempo for me. House. What sort of music was it? What sort of music you guys like?
Jungle, drum and bass.
Gosh, it's heavy.
Talking about the serving, what do you think about the, so if you're we'll just do the pastor, parishioner,
lay people.
I'll be the pastor.
Yes, you be the pastor. I'm the parishioner. Or no, Scott's the parishioner because I'm still not a Christian yet. I'm waiting for someone to lead me. No, I'm joking. Like, what if, when you are frustrated and feeling burnt out, do you think there's room for conversation in that setting in today's church world?
No.
Like, do you think there's stop it there. It's okay.
Hit your buzzer. Scott, no, there's not.
Do you know what I'm...
100%.
So, where you're able to communicate and say, man, this is what's going on.
That's a great point, because if someone's listening and they're feeling totally boxed in by a particular, teaching or something or their situation, and it's a great topic. Do they have the freedom to... I think it says a lot about the person. Obviously, it's going to come down to how you broach the subject. Come in and start pointing fingers and saying... That's bad.
So
that's scripture
from the nosebleed section, so to speak. Everyone has an opinion. Yeah,
true. Well, do you get that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And to be honest with you, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Like, man, what skin do you have in the game?
Yeah.
So don't come with your opinions when you're sitting out there on the sideline. 100%. Yeah.
Give me context to that. What do you mean by that?
Oh, like if
who's the person saying stuff?
Like someone comes in the church and they start saying, "Oh, I reckon you should do," and I really noticed.
Okay, so you're not talking about someone who's saying, "Hey, I'm burnt out." No, I thought that was the question. Was the question?
I think you can have that.
Okay,
and then you can have this situation where somebody is got their shoulder to the grind.
Yeah, you're generally asking to someone, do you think there's room there for a conversation between a pastor or a leader and someone being led? The person being led is feeling fried. Is there a place or an environment for that conversation?
Yep.
And you said no.
No. I don't know.
Why?
Again.
No, I don't disagree. I just want to hear your answer.
Yeah. It comes down to how it's how you approach the subject, but. I hear so a lot of the accusations are going to be that you got a bad spirit or you hurt
Heart
or whatever.
problem.
Which could be it. It could be you're bitter because you said X, Y, Z, or you've got offence. Could be as well. So I think it's case by case basis. But I do think there's definitely a bit of a on the leader. So you shouldn't really question what I say.
I've got a long-winded answer to this. Probably contrary to what people would think I would say. I think there probably is space for the conversation. And I think a lot of the time people think they can't say it. And I put that fault on the leader. If you're hosting an environment where people think you're feeding a perceived pressure, I think that's on the leader. There is a responsibility on the person to, at the end of the day, be able to come forward and say, hey, this is how I feel, I'm fried, I'm burnt out, or I'm working too much. The extended part of that is I feel like there's aren't you called to love the person if they're fried out anyway? Like what's the big, this is on the leader now. If someone comes to you and they're fried and even if they're in the wrong, there needs to be this mentality where there should be no judgment. And I found this is one thing our little community, when I say our community, the community you and Marsh lead, I feel they do that really well. Is it doesn't really matter, like come with your junk and there is no judgment. A lot of places say that, don't always nail it. I mean, but I feel like I can feel the difference there. And this sort of community where we are has a lot of people who come in and quite often they are in the wrong. Like they are offended or they are bitter or they are hurt on their own account. But I think the way that you guys have done really well with dealing with those people, and myself, I went through my own journey with that as well, is the fact that you have loved people through it really well. And I think if any leader can just communicate that, you probably have to start communicating that in your language every now and then. I do it with my staff, in a work environment. I just check in with them. Even if they're going amazing, it's a matter of like, hey, is everything okay?
Yep.
Are you sweet? And then I push it. Like, you can tell me if you're not sweet. You can tell me whatever you want. And sometimes there can be a fear that you don't want to hear what they say. But there's a healthy, they need to know they can actually come to you.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you think it is? Because when you asked before, what's one of those things I shared from love, for love, audience of one, but another thing that I've endeavoured to do in my life is I have actually done exactly that as a lay, use that word, I don't know, lay person, parishioner, whatever. I've always gone to the leader, the pastor, over the years and vented. But that's my nature. Does that make sense? Like if it was Brody, I would knock on the door, make the appointment, whatever, and text, ring, and then I'd sit down and go, I'm just letting you know this is what I think. I'm frustrated by this. I don't like that, but I don't agree with it, X, Y, Z. But I would say this, literally, this is how I've handled some of this stuff. I would say, but in the end, you're my leader. You're a man of God. I trust you. I love you. What I say here stays here. And then I walk out and I feel every time I've done that, like a weight come off my shoulder.
Yeah, there's wisdom in that.
Because in the end, I understand that if they're messing up, God will judge that, not me. Does that, you know what I'm saying? So, but that's my personality. How do people do that?
I've probably done that part wrong, that end part.
Yeah.
That sounds really good.
Yeah.
Because quite often my personality is, I wouldn't go into that situation unless I really think I'm on the money. And there's a danger in that because sometimes when you think you're on the money,
You're not.
You still might be wrong, right? But I generally won't go into it unless I'm really convinced. So I won't just fly off the hip and be wrong 50-50. The problem is if I am wrong, I'm kind of going down swinging because I think I'm spot on. But I've never said that in that context. I've always gone in and said, hey, this is how I'm feeling. It's always been basically, I normally try and bring a solution because that's kind of how I'm wired, is like operations. I'm like, you should do this, this, and this. If we did this, it would work. But I've never said, but you're my leader, and I've never done that.
Yeah.
Because I also haven't grown up in church, and it took me a long time to grasp the revelation behind authority and submission. It took me a long time to get that. Yeah. And to be honest, I didn't get it until I'd come out of environments where I probably should have used it better. But so, I've never done that part, and I reckon that would have served me well.
It has honestly served me well.
To close the conversation with that statement, because
I've done that over the years, and there's times where they've not taken anything I've said on board.
Yeah.
But I haven't gone away ticked, angry, bitter, offended because I've got it off my chest. But going back to my question, why do you think in our church world that there may not be that freedom?
Well, I was going to say,
does that make
sense? The instances where you've been able to go into someone's office, it's, so to speak, obviously there's an open door policy there. There's a safe space where you felt like you could walk in and actually vent. I don't think a lot of environments give people allow people the safety to sort of, and this could be related to even struggling with your faith or questions about things. So if it's an environment where it's I don't know, based on success, you got to be a good leader. You got to be perceived. And I think this is just evangelicals as a whole. if we're looking at how good do I look on Instagram and how good does my ministry look, am I speaking well as a parishioner or as a lay person, does it look like I have my life together? Whereas for me, I'd always see the smaller group settings or, a connect through the week or just one-on-one coffees where people are, I've actually got a chance to chat here.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe walking into someone's office, it's probably intimidating for a lot of people.
True.
And do they have to, is it open door? Can they go and knock on the door? Do they have to go through 3 PAs to get there?
Yeah, that's true. Because you do see the freedom in the disciples and Jesus. You know the story in the New Testament.
That one?
It's in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So, really know the word, guys. Where the boys...
Do you want me to tell another dream?
Yeah. The boys tried to cast the demon out of that dude and they couldn't. And then Jesus says, the father takes the kid to Jesus and he, heals the guy. And then the Bible says, Jesus said to them, well, this kind can only come out by prayer and fasting. But I've heard a lot of preaching on that, prayer and fasting, and we should pray and fast. But straight after, I love it how it says the disciples took him aside and they asked him,
questioned it.
why could we not? So you can see the freedom, in Christ leading them as the disciples. They weren't afraid, even though, they probably felt stupid because they couldn't do it. But they actually, it literally says they took him aside and then said, why can we do it? And he's like, well, this comes by prayer and fasting. So I think it should be in our culture. But
because I've heard like where pastors have sort of stepped out of a church that they've led, and then all of a sudden people start feeling comfortable to tell them stories. So that could be a perceived thing as a parishioner.
Yeah, that's true.
They've got it all worked out. They've got their Christian. Why they? I can't. It's like my wife's been in the fitness industry for 20 years, and people would spend 2 weeks to get their diet in order before they then go and see it. It's like I've got this perceived thing where I've almost got to get my life right before I then go and speak to a leader because they've got their life right.
That would be in the church.
Yeah.
Not saying anyone's making that happen, intentionally.
Yeah.
I think it would be.
Yeah.
So how do you fix that? I think it's just the communication. I think really strong communication and language about a door being opened. And I think as a leader, if you're a really competent and effective leader, you need to be very aware on how you make people feel. If you're aware on how you make people feel, you'll be a far better leader. It's up to you whether you want to make them feel scared, intimidated, loved, welcomed. That's on you. But first of all, you need to know what people feel when they're around you. You made a point before about sometimes going to an office is intimidating. It is. And I'm not someone who gets intimidated, but when I've been in a pastor's office, in their space, you don't feel comfortable. So whether it's intimidation or not, but there's a part of you feels just feels yuck because the spirit around the conversation, you just feel like you're unsure. A really effective leader would probably find you on neutral ground, go and have a coffee somewhere, or just break it down rather than, like you said, go through 3 PAs. I don't think Jesus had a PA. I don't know I don't think he did.
No, the instances where you were talking about, were you entwined in their lives, or were they some that you just saw on that preach on the weekend? Did you knew them?
The pastors and yes, I knew them, and I had my shoulder to the grind.
Yeah,
and there was one context where there was actually no communication of that what we're talking about here, but it's my nature.
Yeah,
I can't just leave it. So
that only works for people with your nature, though.
Yeah, that's right.
And my nature, and probably your nature.
Yeah. So I was happy to go there, but I would. The way I did it was obviously, man, I love you, man, I respect you, but this is what I think, and I would make it very clear. If you do nothing about this, it will stay in this room.
It'll come back to bite you.
So when you're saying
will rot in hell,
when you're saying to them, it stays in this room. Is that you saying that I don't plan on taking this elsewhere, or is it you also reminding them to not take it elsewhere?
No, it's more from both to know that.
I took it the other way.
No.
I thought you were like,
no.
I love you, but this doesn't go outside here. I was like, damn.
No,
all right. No. I should have used that.
I was saying that in the context of me
For
letting
you.
them know I'm not
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
walk
Dumb
out of
down.
here and whinge and complain and
Yeah.
sow a whole bunch of junk to other people about what I don't like or what I'm upset with. Oh, that's what I was.
I like it for both.
Yeah,
I did.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you fix that. I just
It's
think
a
it
hard
comes.
one.
I think it comes down to. I really think it comes down to communication as a
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah.
You really got to be aware on.
So you've got to be secure as a leader,
Absolutely.
not threatened.
I feel like you got to be. I think pastoring, you got to be in people's lives. So being in someone's life probably opens it. Makes that conversation a much more comfortable one. I mean, if you're a lay person and there's a leader there, and okay, you may be serving, but you may never rub shoulders if it's a larger church or whatever. That then almost becomes like an institutional thing. Then I think, and I don't think the church needs to work that way.
And you talked about the office thing. Is that why you've never been to my office at the Rocket in Rabina, top floor?
You never let me up. Always buzzing.
No,
Is
he's
Pastor
busy.
Is Pastor Dan out there?
Busy.
I can see him.
Close to God.
Oh, he's not here. I can see him.
If anybody's watching this from the Gold Coast, I do not have an office in the Rocket. If you know the
He's
Rocket,
always in my
Robina.
office.
I don't even have an office.
I don't.
Let's be real.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I don't know how you fix it, but you see it all the time. The other thing is, I mean, you know how you said there can be sometimes a big gap in a bigger church, maybe from the senior leadership and someone who maybe doesn't rub shoulders with them all the time. This is the question: does the senior leadership, is he the person that is he responsible for that person to come? I think they have so many layers of leaders. Does he really have to be the one, or is there not someone else they can go to? Because I kind of think when there is layers of leadership, why do you need to go and speak to, say, the senior pastor? Why is it so important you speak to them when there's other people that you know that are in your life when the senior pastor is not in your life? Or is it really just a matter of like, I want to sit down with the senior pastor.
It's human nature.
I want to talk to the boss. I want to talk to the manager.
You know when you go to
My
a cafe,
name's Karen. I want the manager.
Yeah, you know when you go to a cafe or a restaurant, the waiter's not. I'm not happy with the waiter. I've done this, and I'm like, mate, where's your supervisor? Where's the manager? Because I want to deal with this.
I would never do this.
Have you not done that?
God
I
loves you
can't.
though.
If I order a steak and a chicken comes and it's raw and they say, how is it? I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. It is
No,
amazing.
I'll be honest. As I've gotten older, I'm like, I just leave it, and then Claire, my wife, will bring it up. Oi, you get over here. Where's the manager? But I think it may be human nature. Like, yeah, just want to talk to the boss or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a problem. I just sometimes people get be let down, I suppose, because you want to talk to the person, you want to talk to the top dog, but you want to have a relationship with them. And then really, I mean, there's probably easier avenues to go. I don't know. I guess I think there's leaders will always say there's an open door policy, but they might just communicate that once a year, and I don't think that will cut it. You need to be onto it all the time with people. It's all the time because people's emotions change with the wind. And I was only talking to my business partner. We feel like sometimes as a business owner, you're basically just a full-time psychologist with your staff, keeping people motivated. When you're not motivating, make sure everyone's motivated and checking in.
Guys, let's go.
Yeah, it's like, it's not even, it's just a matter of like constantly placing vision out. Real vision, like constantly reminding people like, hey, you're valued, we love, because in the day, most people don't love what they do every single day. And so I guess we always want to be really on the front foot of it, but I mean, that's the only way you can do it. You're not always going to get it right. Some people are just going to have problems, is what it is. What do you reckon, Scotty?
Yeah, that's not the pastor's job though, is it?
I don't think, I don't know.
Not. I think that's an totally unfair requirement from lay people. When I'm coming to church, I need you to fire me up in my spiritual
Oh,
walk
that.
once a
I thought
week.
you meant like, well, caring for the people is kind of like, that is. But yeah, no.
So like all these, should we do a podcast on that? All the totally ridiculous expectations on pastors.
Oh my gosh.
Give us a couple. Before we wrap up, give us some of your best. What's the best complaint you've ever heard, Dan? What's the best complaint you've received? Best
Meaning the
complaint.
worst?
The best. Like what's made you walk away and go, wow.
Oh man, you've got me. I can't. There's a lot. I can't even think
Okay.
straight. It's interesting. I wish I could record some of them.
Have you had some real bangers when you've preached? Have you ever been somewhere and someone's come up and just like, you've been on a high, you've walked off going, I've crushed it,
Yeah.
and someone's come up and gone, Did you know?
theologically,
Yeah.
the exposition or whatever. Yeah, 100%. I've had that.
What does it do to you when you get that?
Honestly, I just nod my head and. Actually, that's not true. That depends what frame of mind I'm in.
Yeah, early in your younger years, it would have affected you.
Early, 100%.
Yeah.
And my choleric edge would come out, and I would kind of, just kind of gun them down. But I've chilled out a lot now these days. I realise, hey, thank you. I'll think about that. Whatever. I mean, Sunday I preached. Was it last Sunday? Yeah, last Sunday. And I totally messed up, and I knew I did. I did it twice. I talked about a lot. Not a lot. Job.
Doing it again.
Job.
He still hasn't read it.
I talked about Job and his kids dying and his wife. Well, his wife didn't die. I was thinking about Lot when I said it. I said it twice. And as I'm saying, I'm going,
did anyone correct you?
They did. 2 people. They came up and said, did you know that it wasn't actually, I'm like, I know, man. You know what? 2 people out of a few hundred. Tells you nobody's listening.
People don't know their Bibles.
That reminds me of a funny time once where I after a service, and I went and asked someone. It was this person was actually a pastor, and I walked off, and I knew that. And this is when I probably back then when I cared about performance. And it was really early when I just started singing on platform, just started worship leading, and really didn't have a revelation on what I was meant to be doing up there, to be honest. And I remember thinking at the time, just like, this is just a sinking ship. I would have been sweating out there. And I just remember thinking to myself, this is horrendous. I'm not even a singer. What is going on? And I walked off feeling like that. And it was like that. And I knew it was like that. And I went and asked this guy. And I was like, just be honest. And it was like I wanted him to say, no, man, it's fine.
Be honest.
And I was like, just be honest. Was that bad? And he goes, look, honestly, it was pretty bad. And he just goes, really goes, yeah, it was. And I was like, oh. And he goes, and I was like, what do I, and he goes, I don't know. It was, didn't even offer like next time. And I was like, will there be a next time?
I won't ask you again. Will there be a next time?
I wasn't convinced. So I learned, I'm not going to ask anyone ever again.
Except Lala.
I asked Lala. Lala's onto it. We talk about it, didn't we? Yeah, she's solid. I get Lala. I was like, how do I sound in this song? Do I sound all right? If Lala gives me a nod, all right, we'll release it.
Yeah. Executive producer.
Have we touched on it? Are we wrapping up?
We're wrapping up.
We're wrapping up.
Yep.
We've touched healthy serving. Get the revelation. You get the revelation. There's no such thing as healthy serving. It's just serving because you do it for God. Thanks, boys.
Absolutely.